I am about to show you the best way to play Great Nature in Premium right now. Beyond that, Zero Damage Gaming is bringing back some of their time-limited legacy playmats. If you don't know what this means, Zero Damage Gaming brought out playmats that were very limited in time. Sometimes maybe only 3 weeks and then they were gone. Now there's a lot of people who have been asking for some of these to come back. And so this time, for just December, you will get access to these again. So link will be in the description, use the code Solemn for a discount, and this is basically one more chance to get access to some of these awesome playmats from back in the day. And that includes this beautiful playmat. Without further ado, let's get into some Great Nature goodness. So this is a premium Great Nature deck. This is the best way to play Great Nature right now, in my opinion. It is Bigbelly. Bigbelly is an incredible card. Now in V, it is not all that good. In V Premium, we just do not have like that push. Bigbelly is cute, the draws are insane, but all of the rearguards, rely on themselves to get the power up, and you don't really have any big push beyond that. You can kind of be coping with Culture Gorilla, but that really isn't enough. In Premium, however, we have strides, and so some of these strides make it so Great Nature really does get that push. So we start off with our 4 Bigbelly. This is our primary ride target. This is also the biggest weakness Great Nature has. You only have 4 ride targets, and if you misride, you auto lose. With that being said, we do have some really powerful searchers that only Great Nature has access to, so it's quite alright. The first skill essentially says that whenever a rearguard is retired during either battle phase or end phase, you get a draw. The great thing is that all of your strides essentially say, hey, blow up all your rearguards, but they then vanish before that timing. So if you stride a Balaral, it says retire all your front row rearguards. It goes away, and now you blow that up. Bigbelly sees all those rearguards being blown up, and then you get to draw cards. So usually you will call your whole hand onto the board with this deck, and you might think, damn, I only have 2 cards, I really need to win this turn. But then by the end of the turn, you might have a 14 card hand. So for that reason, for Bigbelly, it's the best ride target. Next, we got 2 Talented Rhinos. Talented Rhinos is the way we win the game. Your opponent cannot guard with Great Zeros, so good luck. All of the biggest shield in Vanguard is in the Great Zeros. Those big critical triggers with 15,000 simply don't work. Good luck with all your Grade 1s. Some Grade 1s are even from Overdress, so they only have 5k, or G Grade 1s, they also only have 5k, Grade 2s have 5k, Grade 3s have 0k. So it's really gonna be like G guarding that's gonna get around Rhino, because this Rhino is also gonna get huge. All of our strides pump it up, and so it's gonna be gigantic, 30,000, 40,000, and then, it's a G guard or bust, basically. We only play 2 because, again, we don't want to ride it, and we can also search it. Again, Great Nature has powerful searchers. Next, we have 1 Bigbelly. This one essentially restands the Rhino, or whichever other thing you are attacking with, and that way, it adds pressure. You're going to be swinging with that thing for 3 times for 40,000. You can only guard with, higher than 0. It is very hard to deal with, and we play one of this in particular because we can search it. So if you already have a Crayon Tiger in your hand, but you need 1 more restand generator, you know that Mike Saburo, our Grade 1 that searches, can always go and fetch it. Next, a new card, new to the arsenal of Great Nature, we have Spool Mary. This card is incredible. For the longest time, Great Nature had the issue that before striding, we did not generate advantage. So you basically had to accept, I need to ride up, I need to pray that I live, and then I get to draw a billion cards. Now, you get to draw maybe half a billion before striding, thanks to Spool Mary. What you're gonna do is you're gonna be riding this. Then when you ride over it, she's gonna come out, she's gonna swing for really big numbers. Bigbelly is gonna swing, gonna restand her, she's gonna swing again for big numbers, then she's gonna blow herself up, and you're gonna get to draw a card because of Bigbelly. So despite your ride up now also being better because you're swinging with some big numbers, you also went +1 because she came from Soul and then refunded herself. And that +1 doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually really a lot for Great Nature, believe it or not. We used to be happy with like Coiling Duckbill going break even. This card is a hard plus, and that can be the difference between living and not living on their first stride, which then means once we get to striding, then we're drawing a billion. That's how Great Nature always worked. You get to stride, you're gonna draw a billion. Now you have higher odds of getting to that stride, while also already getting some push earlier. Apart from that, this is also a very good attacker, because we used to have this issue where if you didn't have Rhino, none of your cards really got big on their own. Like, nothing was really threatening by itself. So your Crayon Tigers and your Bigbellies didn't really have anything to restand. Like, you would call any Grade 1 there and hope, okay, maybe I hit a trigger on it and that'll do some work. No, this is actually already pretty big on its own, and then you get to restand that. So this is usually going to be the thing I put on an Excel circle, and then my Crayons and my Bigbellies are going to be restanding this or Rhino Rhino if I do have Rhino. Next, we have the best card to come out for Great Nature in a very long time. We have this pretty lady. This is a promo, sadly a promo. Essentially what it does is it blows itself up and then makes 2 tokens. Now, when you think of blowing yourself up in Great Nature, what do you think? Bigbelly. Bigbelly is going to draw cards because she blows herself up. So we have our 4 Candelaria, an absolute unit. This card is so insane. So what you're going to do on turn 3, you're going to call her down, you're going to swing with her, so that's already, you know, pushing some pressure. Then she blows herself up, makes 2 tokens, and now you draw. So this card replaced herself with probably a card with higher shield, and now gives you 2 tokens on top of that. Those 2 tokens are going to be great boosters for Crayon Tiger, or, and this part is very crucial, can be blown up with Ardillo, our G Guardian. After blowing them up with Ardillo, we get to draw 2 cards from Bigbelly. So she blows herself up to replace herself, that's to draw 1. And then the 2 tokens get blown up, that's 2 more draws. She turned herself into 3 cards. But who says you only need to use 1? If you draw 2 of this, those 2 turned into 6 cards. This combination in Great Nature is the only reason I would play this deck right now. Now, that doesn't mean this deck is currently like tier 0 best deck or the highest of tier 1, nothing like that. But this is the difference between Great Nature being utterly unplayable and Great Nature being, you know, pretty solid right now. Actually, you know, can contend a little bit. Another really neat trick about this is that Narukami has 2 really scary strides. They have Stunverse and they have Exterminate. Stunverse gets a lot of value when your board is full. Exterminate gets a lot of value when your board is empty. This card meets in the middle. This card creates tokens which you put into your front row, and now the Exterminate doesn't notice an empty front row, so can't give that power buff, while Stunverse can bind those tokens, but those tokens do not go to the bind zone. So this card is like the most annoying thing to deal with for a Narukami player. If you have 2 of this on turn 3, they're gonna have a pretty tough time to do anything useful. Another really neat thing is that since this destroys itself, same thing with the Spool Mary, we now actually have 8 cards that blow themselves up for our Mike Saburo to be able to search, but more on that later. Next we got the OG. You cannot make a deck without it. We have 4 Crayon Tiger. I know a lot of people often complain about Vanguard not doing enough reprints, and while that sometimes is valid, we luckily did get a reprint for Crayon Tiger. For the longest time, Crayon Tiger was the reason people could not build Great Nature in Premium. Crayon Tiger was a $20 card because it was that good, sometimes even 25. So you needed like $100 just to start playing Great Nature. But that's no longer the case because now you just have a reprint that's like $1 or something. So Crayon Tiger, this is the heart and soul of the deck. This is the reason that our stride turns are scary. This thing is going to restand our Rhino or our Spool Mary. I just love Crayon Tiger. Crayon Tiger is beautiful. Also, check out this playmat. This playmat is also beautiful. Go, link in the description, use the code Solemn. So yeah, absolutely need to be playing 4 of this. If you want to argue that you want to cut some copies of this to fit in the Bigbelly Grade 3, because Bigbelly Grade 3 does not need a booster, that is valid, but personally, I really like the fact that I can commit this to the board, and then I will do what I call the switch trick. I will swap the Crayon Tiger with its booster, and then I will use my Strides effect to give the booster the power. Then I will swap them back, and now at the end of the turn, the booster dies and the Crayon Tiger doesn't. So I still got the power gain, and I still got a plus, but I still also have my Crayon Tiger either for next turn or as an interceptor. So that is, you know, one more way I kind of like to ensure that I have my restanders for more turns than just 1. And that's something you cannot really do with Bigbelly unless you commit boosters, in which case, what is the point? Next, we have 4 Mini Belly. This is the Grade 3 Searcher, and of course, is absolutely crucial for the deck. Mini Belly is going to be how you search your Bigbelly ride, along with another card that's going to make that a bit easier sometimes as well. But usually, you know, you're very happy to play Grade 3 Searchers, and in a deck that is so desperate to draw the correct Grade 3, this is absolutely mandatory. Also, this deck's G Guardians are broken, so if you sometimes find a heal with this, that's also really useful. Next, we have my favorite card in the clan. We have Mike Saburo. Okay, not my favorite card. Crayon Tiger and Duckbill, okay, they are the OGs, but Mike Saburo has been with us in competitive Great Nature decks for so damn long. This basically says if something blew up, that something gets to search a Grade 3 right now. So we can search our ride target if we blew up our Canderilana, whatever the hell her name is. You know, if you blow this up on turn 2, you can also search, which is sometimes, you know, the way we can cheat out our correct Grade 3. But usually, you're going to be calling this down on turn 3 to target either your Spool Mary or, again, the token creator, and that way you can either search your next turn ride Pride, so you have 2 Excel circles, your Rhino, which is going to be your attacker, your Bigbelly, which is going to be your restander, or your heal in order to be able to G-guard with that Ardillo, draw 6 cards on your opponent's turn, make them feel real bad about themselves. So this card is like the heart and soul of the deck. If I could play 6 copies of this, I would. And at one point I actually did, because you can play Scale Toucan. Scale Toucan can then bounce back your Mike Saburo, and then you can recall Mike Saburo. So whenever you already have a Mike, Scale Toucan is actually extra copies of it. However, I ran out of room, and so now I'm playing something else instead. But that is something to consider. Next, I am playing Triple Deli Belly. Deli Belly is honestly the reason that I'm no longer playing Scale Toucan, because this thing also requires Soul, and so Soul was getting a little bit of an issue. Deli Belly is absolutely incredibly broken, insane, stupid. If you think back about G era, we had like every clan getting 1 or 2 perfect guards with skills. And most of those skills weren't that incredible. You know, most of those we no longer run these days because draw perfect guards are simply that good. But Deli Belly is the exception. Deli Belly says, when it is retired from G and your Vanguard is a Bigbelly, you can Soul Blast 1 to draw a card and counter charge. Do you understand what that means? Look at him. Look at how cute he is. He's so damn cute. This guy replaces whatever you discarded. You know how everyone's like so excited over that Order PG that is free? This is also free. Now, of course, the Order PG I know gets around guard restricts, whatever. Let me be excited for Great Nature for once. This thing replaces itself and then counter charges. This does everything those stupid counter charge PGs do and then more. If any other deck had this, they would be playing it. Imagine if Ghosties had this. Grand Blue would be tier 0. This card is insane. The only thing holding this back is that it's GB and then it costs a soul. But we're always searching our heals anyway because Ardillo with Bigbelly is broken and this with Bigbelly is broken. This is so good. These are sadly not SP yet. My friend Astral Suzuno on YouTube actually has these for me right now. Thank you so much. I really want to bling this deck out. It's one of my favorite decks of all time. But yeah, this is the way Bigbelly can really keep up its hand as well, because once you start drawing all those billion cards in your opponent's turn with the Ardillo combo, you start noticing, damn, this deck has a shield issue. Old Great Nature decks always had like the 5k shield problem that I used to joke about, where you played all these Duckbills and these Mike Saburos and all of these cards that didn't have shield, so despite you drawing a billion, you still didn't draw that much shield. However, if you now draw these types of cards, and of course we also run more 15k triggers now, the shield issue is solved, but also all those 5ks you can now discard for this and then replace them again, so you have even more shots of turning bad shield into good shield. I can't say enough good things about, you know, the way Great Nature is going right now. Of course, I still know Great Nature still has that the inconsistency sometimes, the piece reliance sometimes not plussing enough in the early game. That's still a thing in this deck, but I feel this is like the closest we've ever gotten to fixing it. Now finally we have one flex slot. This one flex slot is 2 cards basically, so 2 flex slots. You can put whatever you want in here. I used to have 2 Scale Toucan, but the issue with that is that we already use so much soul with Deli Belly. So if you play the Scale Toucan, you kind of need to start using draw PGs, and I don't want that because Deli Belly is broken. I also tried Rollock to kind of stop our early game issue a little bit, but at 2 you're really not seeing it that often, and also we always want to be riding up. If our deck had a bit of a grade 2 game, I could see it, but we're always riding up instantly, so it's not really doing that much either. So I decided to play something else. I'm playing Honolly. If you know or don't know, Great Nature can cheat this out in our opponent's turn and then also give it resist. Great Nature is probably the best deck to actually utilize Honolly, and so for that reason, why wouldn't I run it? So here it is, 2 Honolly. We can cheat it out during our opponent's turn. I actually played this deck for funsies at BCS France, not quite in this setup. I was already qualified anyway, so I was like, fuck it, I'll play one of my favorite decks that I don't really get to play competitively that often, but I wasn't playing Honolly, and one of my losses was against Victor of all decks. Yeah, Victor, because I was like, wow, if this Rollock in my hand right now was Honolly, I would live an auto win, but it's not. It's a Rollock, and that's when I was like, okay, I get it. Great Nature's not the best deck. I guess we need to, you know, some way to floodgate our opponents sometime. So 2 Honolly is in right now. This can help us against Steam Maiden. It can help us against Narukami. It can help us against so many decks right now. All of the good decks right now. Nightmare Dolls even. We can just cheat it out with All Mirage and go like, okay, now what? This card is pretty needed, I think. Even though I'm usually not a big fan of the card, I think, in this deck in particular, because again, All Mirage, our G Guardian, just cheats it out and then gives it resist. What are you gonna do about it? Absolutely nothing. Then our final grade 1 is this beauty. Of course, the order. You want to be playing this in every single deck you can. Not every deck can though. Like NLK has issues playing this because they really need every piece to be a soul charger. They really want to be riding any grade 1 so they can call a food to the back row. So DI can't really play it. Highlander cannot search this because it is an order and not a unit. So they also can't really play it. And again, there's a variety of decks like that cannot play this. But if your deck can play it, this card is absolutely insane. There's going to be a staple basically in any deck that doesn't have anti-synergy with it. Because this gets around guard restrict. So certain Dimension Police decks usually just scoop. Like Dimension Police goes with Linka and you go, hey, I got this thingy, GG. This is insane. Against NLK, they go hope on damp. I'm gonna hope on damp you. Oh yeah, okay. Bye. This card auto wins certain matchups, and so you have to play it if, again, you don't have anti-synergy in your deck with it. Next, for triggers, you might think, oh, triggers are boring, right? No, this deck is actually pretty cool when it comes to triggers. So first of all, we have our 4 stride crits, of course. Then we have our soul crits. We do not really have a soul problem, but, you know, 3 Deli Belly, if you start using all of them, of course, then you do have a soul problem. So it's still pretty good to have. And then finally, we have 3 vanilla critical triggers. Now, you might be thinking, Solemn, why would you play a vanilla trigger? You can literally play the soul crits, you know, from D. They're not that crazy good, but it might come up and then you'll be mad that you didn't run it. No, because we sometimes, when going for the kill, will put our triggers onto the board. And this one actually makes a difference because it is vanilla. Recall that we are playing tokens. And tokens are also vanilla, which means we can play one beautiful card in our G-Zone. I am, of course, talking about Cyclone. Cyclone buffs up vanillas. So those tokens we made earlier are gonna be big boys. But the same can be said for the critical trigger. So I actually would much rather have a much beefier crit that then will kill itself because of Belial or any of the strides and draw me a nuke card and then have been big, rather than a stupid soul crit that I never ever use. You know, you can say, oh, but what if you need the skill? I will need that booster so much more often. Cyclone makes that worth it. And then finally, of course, over trigger, bullshit, auto win. This deck in particular, by the way, has a really cool auto win trick with over triggers. If you drew your over trigger, you actually have a way to reverse stack your deck to ensure you will always hit it. And then finally, of course, we have our 4 Heal Guardians and our V starter. V starters are broken, Heal Guardians are insane, and we can surge them with Mike Saburo because they are grade 3. For the G-Zone, we have 2 Belial. Belial is a pretty boy. I will say, while this deck used to use this card much more often, these days, not so much. You know, usually it's going to be used once or 0 times in a game. But there are certain matchups and certain game states where you're still going to use both. And so you do need to play both. You know, sometimes people will meme like, oh, premium, I just spam the same stride. It's not true, first of all. But secondly, this deck is like the opposite of that. This deck does not spam strides. This deck will go into every single stride in your G-Zone at some point in a tournament. So as I explained before, this card will buff up your front row, make it really beefy, and then blow it up. But it's an act, so you just put in the front row whatever you're fine with losing, and then you can still swap it. So again, the switch trick with Crayon Tiger, you have a Crayon Tiger, you have your boosters, you just swap them, Crayon Tiger to the back row, you say Belial, buff everything up, and then you swap them back. Now you won't be losing your Crayon Tigers. You do lose the on hit on that column then, because, well, it's the booster that gained the on hit, but he's no longer hitting, but you don't really care. Most people are so afraid of the on hit that they're not letting anything hit anyway. And also the Crayon Tigers are usually the easiest ones to guard. You know, it's Rhino that they're more so really afraid of. Now next, we have the best new stride in Great Nature history. We have Caladrius. This card changed everything. I've been saying that about a lot of stuff in this deck so far, but you may have noticed I have not made a Great Nature deck profile in years. Great Nature got like a lot of stuff at once to make this deck go from tier 70 to tier 2. So now, Caladrius, once again, a really impactful card. We are playing 2 copies of this. This is probably the closest we will get to the stride that we spam. And again, we're never really spamming strides in this deck. Like, we're gonna use a little bit of everything, but this is still like the better one usually. It will give your entire front row 10,000, which is usually bigger than what Belial will give you. Again, later on, Belial will get bigger. So again, you're not gonna be really spamming. You're gonna have to think a little bit. You might also notice, damn, I can G-Guardian right now, but I don't really want to. However, if I do, my Balaral will make everything even bigger. So I will, so I can Balaral. So you kind of have to be thinking about that. But if you're not doing that, Caladrius is usually going to be a bit bigger. And so Caladrius gives you that 10k to your front row. Again, same idea as with the Balaral from earlier. You can do the switch trick with your Crayon Tigers. And then when it attacks, it will choose something that has 30,000, restand it, and then give it the ability that your opponent needs to guard with 3 or more on those attacks. So what do? You swing with your Rhino first, who will, if he's on an XL2, always be 30,000 because he himself is 1-1. Then you add 5 from the XL, so that's 16. Then you add 10k from Caladrius, that's 26. And then because Rhino is now successful, he gains another 4, so now he's 30. So he will be exactly 30 for Caladrius on an XL2. Caladrius will restand him, and now, not only does your opponent need to not guard with zeros on Rhino, they also need to guard with 3 or more. So good luck with that. Basically, once you have the Caladrius combo with Rhino and Crayon Tigers and maybe even a Bigbelly, people are usually dying. This is like really impactful stuff. And then once again, at the end, Caladrius will go to the G zone, stuff will blow up, and you will draw a billion cards thanks to Bigbelly. Next, we have 1 Mana Garmer. This is sometimes still our first stride. Like I said, we're not really spamming one particular stride. This one says we're going to be milling a bunch, and then we're going to give a bunch of power and a bunch of drives. If you're lucky, you're going to have 5 drives and 20k extra power on Rhino, and sometimes you will straight up kill people already. In playtesting, when me and Noan were playtesting this deck, we would often say like the gang's all here when we would have exactly Crayon Tiger twice, 2 boosters for it, and a Rhino, because that means the whole gang is here, and now we're gonna crush your face. So if you then hit like a crit or something on the Rhino, it's game over. And again, hitting crits is pretty easy because you're playing a lot and because this card drive checks a lot. So usually that Rhino is gonna swing for like 40,000, 2 crits, don't guard with grade zeros. I'm gonna do this 3 times. Hope you have a bunch of G-Guardians. So that still exists. Sometimes you are also pushed so hard that you don't have pieces, and then this will basically give you like so many drive checks that you hope to basically have enough hand to live your opponent's turn. So this card still comes up for sure. Then I have the Cyclone. Like I said, Cyclone is going to be the way you make your plant tokens bigger and also your vanilla crits bigger. If I had room, I would play more of this. You know, you can definitely flip 2 of this and make those vanillas even bigger, but I sadly do not have the room. Despite that though, this is already a really big buff. Like if you think back to like a Caladrius turn, normally your Crayon Tiger boosted by a Mike would be 16, add a 10k, it would be 26. 26 is a really shit number. However, if you have a Crayon Tiger boosted by a critical, that's 10k, so that's 19 plus 10 is 29. 29 is not shit. Again, the highest shield most people have in their decks is 15, you know, a 15k critical trigger. So by having that crit be a 10k, you're already forcing 2 cards instead of 1. 2 cards instead of 1 is big, you know, that's a big difference. Especially because your opponent cannot use those criticals on Rhino. So they're like super happy if they can throw them away on the Crayon. So if your Crayon is only 26, it's like, yeah, I have this anyway. But if your Crayon is asking that 15 plus another card, that is really big. Either it's going to be 2 15s because they're saving all of those grade 1s and 2s for Rhinos, or they have to take it. Then we have another stride. Once again, this deck does not spam strides. We have the Reverse Stacker. So this card is probably like the worst thing ever for many Grey Nature players. We were super sad when this thing first dropped because we were hoping for something better, but there is one neat trick it can do. It says when your card is put from your deck or rearguard into your drop zone, you may put it on the bottom of the deck. So what if you are close to deck out? You could call a rearguard and then call something over that rearguard, which means that rearguard was put into the drop zone, so you put it on the bottom of the deck, and now you could call something over that existing rearguard, and so that rearguard was going to the drop zone, so it goes to the bottom of the deck, and hey, you can do that again and again and again. So if you are close enough to deck out, where you have only 1 or 2 cards in your deck, you can call your over trigger, and then you go, oops, I can call something over my over trigger, and now my over trigger goes to the bottom of my deck, but you only had 1 or 2 cards there, so now you know for a fact your drive check is hitting the over trigger. But now of course you would deck out, so you call something else over whatever you called then. And another thing, now you notice you went 2 unknowns, over trigger, and then something. Now, let's say it wasn't 2 unknowns, but 1 unknown. So you know for a fact you're going to be hitting unknown, over trigger, draw those 2 cards because of Stoicheia, and then there's 1 more card. What if that 1 card is a crit? Oh, you can just make it so. So if you get close enough to deck out, and again, you have that control because the G Guardians in Great Nature basically say draw however many cards you want, you can go, okay, I'm going to go exactly unknown, over trigger, critical trigger. It's all gonna be on my Rhino, and you're gonna take it because you cannot use your draw PGs. That is what this card is capable of. For that reason, it's still in the deck. Again, you do need to get close to deck out, but this deck doesn't really have a problem with that. It will also buff stuff up, so if you're late into the game, you can basically say, oh, this thing gets bigger, and even bigger, and even bigger. It does take a lot of souls, so you kind of need to plan for it. But the most important part is basically stacking the over trigger. Then we have our GB8. This card is basically often bigger than Balaral. You know, again, I can choose how big my hand is in Great Nature usually. So you can go like, oh, I have 10 cards in my hand and I need to kill you now because I'm gonna deck out or something like that. You just go, okay, I discard 2 cards and give a bunch of power to the board. But this card doesn't say once per turn and it's an act. So you go, okay, I'll discard 2 more cards and give a bunch of power to my board. And you go, oh, I'll discard 2 more cards, give a bunch of power to my board. And you can just spam that. So for example, in my last round in BCS France, and that actually happened on stream, I ended up spreading, I think, like 200,000 power to my board. Yeah, 200,000 power. Good luck living that. My opponent did because he hit the defensive over trigger, of course, which is, you know, very funny. Should I commentate that match? Let me know in the comments down below. Maybe I should commentate it. Maybe it might be, you know, interesting to go through my thought process. But sorry, you can't think your way through the over trigger. So yeah, GB8 will sometimes still come up. Sometimes your hand is so big, but you need to win this turn and you're like, okay, we're gonna just put 200,000 power on the board and hope you don't live it. Next, we have a bunch of G Guardians. As I said, Great Nature has a lot of really, really powerful G Guardians. We start off with 2 Spangled. Spangled used to be the best G Guardian in Great Nature, but right now, you know, there's even better ones. So Spangled says when it is used to guard, you will, after retiring those Guardians, draw 1 card. You know, each Guardian basically gains that effect. But you can use 2, and then each Guardian gets that effect twice. This means that you can call a guard, go Spangled again, and now that 1 card will retire, and then you will draw 2. But what if you called 3 cards? Then you will draw 6. What if I call 7 cards? Then I will draw a 14. So there have actually been instances where I simply went, okay, I will throw my entire hand onto the Guardian Circle. So that's 8 cards. And then I will go Spangled, and that means I can draw 16. So in your opponent's turn, you are drawing 16 cards if you want to. This is again why you can choose to go to deck out in this deck and then reverse stack the over trigger. This also means that you flipped up 4 cards in your G zone. So you're getting closer to this, but you're also getting closer to a much bigger Balaral. Next, we have the new best G Guardian in Great Nature, in my opinion. We have Ardillo. Like I explained before, this basically says you can blow up from yourself whatever you want, and then depending on the amount of open circles you will have, you will gain extra shield. You don't really care about the extra shield. What's important is we can blow stuff up. And then Bigbelly, we haven't really been talking much about Bigbelly anymore, but here's Bigbelly. Bigbelly will then see all of that stuff being retired in the battle phase and go, okay, draw. So you can have like 7 cards on your board, go, okay, I'll activate Ardillo, blow up 7, and then Bigbelly will say, okay, I draw 7, GG. Then we have 1 Sankalpa. This just sometimes comes up where you have like 1 card on board and you're like, oh, I kind of want the big Vanguard, draw 1 card, you know, a lot of clans would actually be so happy to be able to have a Sankalpa that, you know, says CB1, draw 1 and get really big. But in Great Nature, it's like, yeah, but we have better G guards. Also really interesting, and I didn't know about this, you can actually activate this without having Rearguards, and then for every open circle, your Vanguard still gains a bunch of power. So you can even use it, you know, to just get really, really, really big. Then I'm playing 1 Almirage. If you notice, damn, I really want to have 2 for my Honolly play, you can, but I haven't really noticed that. Again, this basically cheats out anything during your opponent's turn, which can include the Honolly, and then your opponent goes, oh, I wish I could retire it mid-battle phase, but they can't because it also gains resist. However, there is one more interesting matchup-specific thing you can do with this card, and I did this actually in the BCS against a Narukami player. They wipe your board, you know, with Exterminate or with Stunverse, even if it's tokens or it's not tokens, doesn't really matter. Your board is probably empty, and so they attack with their Choos and maybe with their Zuitan, you know, and those cards, their abilities only go off if you have an empty front row. So what do? They wipe everything and they think, oh, and I'm gonna do Choo restance and I'm gonna draw with Zuitan and blah blah blah. So they go Choo, now I go with Zuitan. Then you just go, okay, Almirage, call something in the front row, Cho-Oh doesn't restand. Zuitan doesn't go to Soul. Ouch, that's too bad. So Almirage literally hard counters all of the restanding that deck is trying to do. Now Vowing still plays around that, of course, but if they're going for the X-turn big turn, Almirage basically shits all over that. Even if you're not playing Honoli, you should still be playing this purely because of Naru, which I was doing. Then we have one of this, the new G-Guard. Again, this is a very powerful G-Guardian. It either gets huge or is an automatic perfect guard. The only reason I'm not running more is because all the other G-Guards are simply that broken. You know, if you can choose between maybe perfect guard or maybe relatively big or a definite draw 7, sorry, I'm choosing the draw 7. And then the final G-Guardian, Kundalini, this basically says counter charge. It doesn't come up very often, but sometimes you're like, your opponent is going to be denying you because they notice if you have like the CB for Caladrius, the CB for Crayon and so forth, they might auto lose, so they might deny you, and then you just go, oh, you want to deny me? Sorry. You just go Kundalini, now you get your counter charge back, and now you're going to be able to play the game, you know, with all of your CB open, probably auto win. You don't need this very often because Delibelly also counter charges, but again, it's just one more option. Finally, of course, we can have our Excel circles. Oh, they're so beautiful. I love these, you know, these pink ones are very, very cool. Then we also have our little plant tokens, which you might be using. So that is my Bigbelly premium deck right now. Again, if you need any playmats, go to zerodamagegaming.com, use the code Solemn. If you need any cards, go to 50cards.shop and use the code Solemn. Links will be in the description. You know, cards, playmats, it's what you need for playing your card games. This is definitely, in my opinion, the best way to play Great Nature right now. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you soon. Ciao.